So I'm gonna address part of what you're asking as best I can, and also say that it's a gigantic question that we could talk about for a long time. And I think everyone will have a very personal uh, and individual response about it, right? It's part of it is personal. Um, so I'm just going to say some big things that are different, so that we can see some of the pieces that are pushing on each other, right? One is that, of course, mindfulness, it comes from a religion, right? It's coming from initially from Buddhist religion, and uh, there's certainly a way of teaching it that is entirely religious, right? Where we're learning Buddhism and, being Buddhists and honoring the Buddha and so on, right? And that's like kind of the full religious package. And that's a beautiful thing for what it is, right? For those who want to do that, for those who want to engage in that way, that's wonderful. Um, when we're going out into the corporate world, or like you're saying, into, like even governmental stuff, um, oftentimes we're finding people who, actually aren't allowed to do something like that, right? As part of the job, it would be actually illegal or against the rules to bring in something that was explicitly religious. And so sometimes, the way to bring in some of these teachings is to completely remove all of that, all the explicitly religious components, and go just with uh, science studies, and with, here's the techniques, and here's what this is shown to do, and so on. And I think those two, these are opposite poles, right? There's one where it's kind of a religion and a practice coming out of a religion, and another one where it's very, very, very secular. And so what I used to see like 10 years ago was people who were actually coming from Buddhist religion and then sort of trying to go to the secular place, but really still coming from religion. And so it was very, I don't mean personally coming from religion, because of course they're allowed to do that, but I mean in the presentation, it was still kind of mixed in there in a way that was not working very well, especially in Silicon Valley, where we have a tremendous number of people who are like allergic to that, where they would learn to do mindfulness unless you used the word Buddha once. If you said the word Buddha, they were out of the room. So I mean, you couldn't kind of sort of make it kind of spiritual. It either needed, to be completely non-spiritual to the nth degree, or you weren't going to teach them to meditate today. So that's, for example, why I wrote the book, The Mindful Geek. I mean, I think the word Buddhism is in there maybe once, and it's in the intro, because I was learning how to do that way. Because I realized that as someone who wants to bring power of meditation, power of mindfulness to people, I realized there's a whole gigantic audience that wouldn't even listen to me the first sentence out of my mouth if I made it Buddhism. Same thing. If I was in the Midwest, that's the same as saying Satanism, to half my family. So it's like, I just had to learn to describe it in this extremely secular manner. And so when you're asking that question, again, there's way more to say about all this, but it it's not necessarily the case that you are selling out mindfulness if you're making it available to people who wouldn't otherwise listen to you. You know, if you're, it's a lot more about your intention. If you're bringing it in a way that is going to help open people's hearts, that is going to help people, you know, even though I've been kind of criticizing this, help people relax more, help people relate to others better. That's a beautiful intention that I think anyone who was teaching mindfulness from the religious perspective would honor that you were doing that, and that, at least in my opinion, would be happy that you put that into a container that people could learn it outside of a sort of more spiritual sounding container. On the other hand, Drea, right? Drea, for you personally, it might be the case that you want to have that spiritual element. That's what you're trying to teach. And so then for you, it's important that that's in the description. This isn't just straight up, completely secular mindfulness. This has a spiritual component. And because that matters to you personally, that's in your heart, and that's what you want to share, and that's what you want to bring, then as long as you're making that clear that that's the container you're bringing, then that will get you to match with employers who want to have that, right? And who want to bring that for their employees, and people who aren't quite so terrified of that. I mean, it's funny because I've just had to work, like I say, with folks who just know that's a nope the minute that's in there. And so, but you get to make it work for you, and then that might get you fewer jobs, but it will get you the right jobs, right? That desire that's in your heart to uplift and to inspire and so on is honored. So I strongly encourage you to. There's no rules in this field. Like, it's not like there's an AMA or some kind of body so far that's going to certify you in a way that the whole world recognizes as the one certification or anything like that. So you get to create a way of talking about what you're doing and presenting it that works for you, and then see how you'll get the right kind of people asking for your programs.